Thanks. Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ASMGi cybersecurity webinar, the first in our series. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. There still are people registering, so I'd like you to ask you to be patient for just 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll get started. Just a couple quick points. If you have any questions, please use the Ask a Question box on the left-hand side of your screen, and we'll get to those questions, if not during the presentation, immediately after the presentation. But please feel free to ask when you think of them. Thanks a lot, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Hello, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody who's joining us. We're still getting some registrations coming in, so we're just going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started. Real quick, just a reminder, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the question box on the left-hand side. Thanks a lot, and just another minute or 2, we'll get started. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today for our cybersecurity webinar on the dark web. This is a very exciting topic, a very pertinent topic for the attendees here. And we're going to get started right now. This is presented to you by ASMGi and Q6 Cyber. We're going to get started. Steve Racing from ASMGi is going to kick us off. So I'd like to introduce you to Steve. Steve is the CEO of ASMGi, and he's going to introduce the webinar for everybody. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to all of you for attending today. Very excited about the program we have. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the dark web, and what's interesting is we hear a lot of these terms, and actually there is an entire language in the underground and the dark web, but there are a lot of terms, and I don't know that any of us really know what they're all about. So we're going to cover a lot of material, but it's basically, what is it, first of all, and what are some of the terms that are used to describe what the dark web or the underground are, and who are the people that that hang out there, right? Who are the threat actors in the underground that are targeting our cyber information? How is it that I can get data from the dark web? What's out there, and how can I retrieve that data from the underground and the dark web? And then once I have it, what do I do with it now? So what are other leading organizations doing with this information once they get it, and how can it lead to helping you fight cybercrime and basically avoid fraud and things like that? So that's the topic for today. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a quick word on ASMGi and who we are. So ASMGi is a global technology services and consulting firm headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. Our focus is really on providing solutions that provide an impact to your business ultimately. So how do we do that? We deliver that through IT services, software services, and cybersecurity services and solutions. Ultimately, we help our customers plan, manage, and execute a pretty wide breadth of things. But the core elements of that are basically strong programs, right, that act as a foundation. So particularly in security, as you know, a lot of compliance requirements are driving program development and things like that. So if you don't already have robust and mature processes and programs, we can help develop those. But it's not just about compliance, right? It's to help foster the best practices across the organization, really build a culture of security and operational excellence and best practice across the enterprise. So the way we do that is by partnering with best-in-class platforms and tools, and it drives value by, and our model and methodology really drive value by more fully adopting the technology and shortening the time to value ultimately. So, and one of the things I think that we really focus on, we have a very strategic portfolio of technology partners, of which Q6 is one. But we really look at the entire ecosystem, right? So it's about creating a security ecosystem model that ensures the tools work together well and that they're directly addressing the business issues that you're facing. So at the end of the day, it's really about executing, and our execution plans are designed to specifically to achieve results, right? So the way that we do that, one of the things we have is a branded offering called One Team. It's pretty much everything as a service capabilities. We can wrap it around our technology partners, but it's very process focused and compliance driven. And our goal is really to ensure that you maximize adoption of products, the products and platforms that you implement. We call this benefits without the burden. So we want you to be able to get the benefits of modern technology without the burden of having to learn a new technology and implement new processes and even manage the platforms and the administrative side of what comes along with that. So we really use a fill the gap approach, and what that means is that we want to leverage the resources you already have, whether it's existing tools or techniques or platforms, but certainly your resources, your people resources, but also, again, your process and technology. Our goal is really to complement and supplement those with additional tools that can kind of fill the gaps in the areas that you need some help with. And certainly those are some of the things that we'll talk about with Q6. Ultimately, for us, action equals results. So results really are the direct output of an action. But from our perspective, if you can orchestrate those actions, orchestrated actions equals great results, and that's where they come from. So anyway, that's who ASMGi is. I'm very excited about today's webinar, and primarily because, Q6, to me, what they're really about is delivering actionable information. So Ellie's going to take us through, kind of the what and the who and the how of, how the dark web operates and various different things. But at the end of the day, it's about delivering something to you that you can actually act on, and this really ties in closely to our philosophy. So we're very excited about that. Most of us know that the dark web exists, but I don't know that very many of us know really what it is, what it looks like, how it works, and all those things. So we're going to actually get in the weeds on that today. And then, as we all know, consensus in the industry is it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right, that your data will be compromised. So is it really possible to minimize or eliminate fraud or bad things that can happen to your data? once it makes it to the dark web. So we're going to touch on all of those things and get in the weeds. And I want to get out of the way so Ellie can do his thing. So please welcome Ellie Dominitz, CEO of Q6 Cyber.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I appreciate everybody taking time away. What I'm going to try to do today is give you a real live insight into what the dark web, the deep web, and the digital underground really is. So this is not going to be a presentation of a number of slides. We're going to try to really show you what it looks like out there and what are the implications for different types of companies, whether you're a financial institution, an e-commerce company, etc. Quickly, just by way of a definition, so when I use the term the digital underground, I'm talking about the dark side of the internet. So the internet that most of us typically use is what's available via a browser, Chrome, Internet Explorer, whatever it is that you use. That is the internet that is, for the most part, indexed by various search engines and is available to any user that's got a browser, whether on a desktop or on a mobile device. But there's a huge world out there that is really not indexed by search engines and is intentionally hidden from those kinds of applications. And that's used by bad guys, by cyber criminals, by hackers, by fraudsters, other types of threat actors to collaborate with one another, to exchange stolen information or tools, to just chat with one another, and really traffic data and services using the World Wide Web. And so when we talk about the underground, the digital underground, we're talking about that entire universe, sometimes referred to as the dark web, the deep web. It's really a massive universe, and in many estimates, orders of magnitude greater than the surface web or the traditional internet that is available to all of us. What we try to do at Q6 Cyber is monitor that digital underground. So we use proprietary technology that we've built in-house. We also have human beings, analysts who speak multiple languages. And we identify many different communities, marketplaces, forums on the underground world. And we try to collect as much information as we can from those sources. The goal is, once we collect that information, we parse it, we analyze it, we can deliver very targeted, very actionable intelligence that allows companies to be proactive about cybercrime, about fraud, and other illicit activity targeting them directly or their customers or partners. So really the idea is, if you take one thing away from this whole webinar today, is not only is there a tremendous amount of activity in the underground community on the part of hackers, cyber criminals, and fraudsters, but most importantly, there is the opportunity to collect, monitor that kind of information, and then use it in a very actionable way to preempt cyber attacks, to preempt fraud activity, and other threats targeting organizations, whether they're private or public sector. So with that, we'll jump right into the live demo. I'm going to share my screen here in a moment, so give me just 1 second here. What's important for everybody to appreciate today is that everything I'm showing is live data. I would not recommend trying this at home. We've got certain tools and ways to kind of protect ourselves when we navigate this underground community. But I recommend using a browser of any kind to do this kind of activity. So we'll begin the demo with some discussion of the ecosystem around payment card fraud. So as everybody I'm sure is aware, there are lots of bad guys, hackers, and cyber criminals who are trying to hack into retailers and e-commerce companies who are processing payment card transactions, credit, debit, and gift card transactions. And so these folks are hacking into these organizations, trying to get in and then collect large amounts of payment card data. once they've collected that information, they're able to use it to commit fraud. Now, this ecosystem, like most businesses, legitimate businesses, is actually made up of a value chain. You've got the folks who conduct the hacking operations, and then you've got different groups, in many cases very, very different organizations, that go through the steps of cashing out and actually committing the fraudulent attempts. What I'm going to show you today is a very, very popular underground marketplace called Joker Stash. You're seeing it right here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. This marketplace serves as a very, very efficient marketplace for hackers who compromise and collect this kind of data, payment card data, and then the buyers of that, which would be folks who are committing the fraud. So Joker Stash has been around for many, many years. It's operated by a very sophisticated group of cyber criminals, most likely located in Eastern Europe and Russia. These folks, I can tell you, are making millions of dollars a month from these kinds of activities. What we have here on the landing page of Joker Stash, or JStash as it's known, it's kind of a news page. So here's where they announce to their customer base what's available. And as you have it today, as you can see in the date here on the top, today they actually just released a new breach, meaning a new batch of data. In this case, as you can see on the top, it contains about 2.1 million payment cards. So we're talking about 2.1 million credit or debit cards that have been siphoned, really stolen from a merchant or perhaps a number of merchants, and are now available for sale on this platform. So if you're a criminal looking to commit this kind of fraud, you can easily come here and purchase that data so you can go in and commit the fraud. And let me show you what that looks like. So this is another page on Joker Stash, and this is where if you are a user, really a customer of this platform, and you're looking to purchase data, this is where you go. As you can see here on the top, we have a very advanced, very flexible search interface that allows you to search by bank, by country, by state, by city, anything that you're looking for. And then when you find what you want, you can purchase that. So let me just run through an example quickly in real time, and not picking on any institution in particular. So I just picked JP Morgan Chase in Connecticut. So I'm going to apply the filter, and as this refreshes here, you can see I'm scrolling down the results here. What we're looking at are what seem to be JP Morgan Chase issued MasterCard cards. In this case, based on my search criteria, they belong to account holders who live in the state of Connecticut. And as you can see, they're available for purchase anywhere from $8 to $17 per card. This is, by the way, very common. Again, I wasn't picking on any one institution in particular, just by way of example. The point is, whatever it is that I'm looking for, whether it's a specific bank, whether it's a region of the country or a different country where I've got the operations and the know-how to commit the fraud, I can come in here, collect this kind of information, and when I'm ready to buy, I can buy. Obviously, transactions on a platform like this, and almost everything you're going to see today, are done using Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrencies. Obviously, the participants in these marketplaces want to remain anonymous. And so this marketplace is very, very easy, and again, very, very popular amongst the criminals and cyber criminals who participate in this kind of payment card fraud. The one thing that is really important to stress here, and you see this coming up as we go through additional examples, these kinds of platforms, marketplaces, and other tools that you're going to see have really lowered the bar for cyber criminals to get in the business of fraud. If you rewind back a number of years, in order to commit cybercrime and fraud, you had to be more technically savvy. You had to have more resources, more capabilities. What these platforms and tools have enabled is, criminals and fraudsters around the world with actually very limited internal capabilities to draw on a number of vendors and providers in the underground community that make it very easy to commit the fraud. So if I want to be a fraudster, if I want to commit payment card fraud, I don't have to be knowledgeable enough to steal the payment card data to hack into merchants. I can use resources such as this one to very easily and very quickly obtain this kind of data and get in the business of fraud and cybercrime very, very easily. So, what the underground has done is really lower the bar. This, is not too different from what we've seen in legitimate business, where outsourcing and really the internet has made it very easy for startups and folks with limited resources to have access to some tools and services that weren't available to them 5-10 years ago. And again, this same trend has been playing out in this underground community. I want to show one more aspect of the site before I move on to another example. What's interesting about JStash and many other marketplaces like it is that you've got the ability to gain additional data of your targeted victims. So in this case, on JokerStash, if I bought a card record belonging to John Smith, I can also go here and try to collect additional PII on John. So social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name, additional PII that would enable fraud and identity theft for this individual. So again, a platform that is very, very comprehensive, very popular with cyber criminals. And for those of you who've been tracking large data breaches over the past several years, it may come as no surprise that many of them ended up on this platform. So cards from large retailer breaches ended up on JStash. It is a very, very popular and, again, one of the leading clearinghouses for this kind of data. I'm going to move on to a different example here. Excuse me. What we're looking at now is obviously a Russian language website. This is a forum for cyber criminals, hackers, and fraudsters to engage in a variety of topics. So, what we saw before was obviously very focused, very dedicated marketplace for one type of product, if you will. What we're looking at here is a much more open platform. This is one where folks who are engaged in different types of criminal activities, cyber criminal activities, and fraud can come in, find vendors, find partners, or really just advice and counsel from other folks engaged in similar activities. You can see some of the ads here. So like legitimate websites, they have advertisements. Obviously, what's different here is that the advertisements are from other criminal organizations or websites. We're looking at now are carding shops and other shops that traffic in bank data and other stolen accounts. But if you kind of ignore the advertisements and you just look at each of these rows, these represent different types of topics. And I'm going to switch to the English language version of this so folks can see what some of these topics are. Let's go down here. So I'll just pick on a few. So payment systems, folks who are looking for different types of schemes as well as different types of opportunities to launder money and move money using online payment platforms. As you can see here, 571 threads related to this topic and close to 5,000 posts. So very, very active topic in this community. Another one, auctions and casinos. Again, folks that are engaged in schemes as well as opportunities to move money or launder money around using some of these platforms. Credit cards here, obviously, very, very popular topic, similar to what we saw before. Virology and hacking, these are more technical topics. So as you can see in the description, folks who are looking for tools, botnets, ransomware. Again, very, very popular, hundreds of threads, thousands of posts. So these again provide a platform for folks to engage with one another, exchange information, do business with one another in a very accessible way and in a very anonymous way. What I like to show folks is the bottom here. this community is very, very active. So as of right now, there are about 47,000 members on this community. Most of them are Russian speakers, and thousands of threads and posts. So a very, very active community, one of many. There are lots and lots of these types of forums and communities that we can share with you. Obviously, in the interest of time, we're just showing one example. But the point is, there is a numerous opportunities for bad guys to engage with one another and to do business. Going back to what I mentioned in the beginning of the demo, why is this relevant? Well, if you think about the opportunity to use this for good, so to track these kinds of activities, to track the kinds of conversations and the schemes that are being shared, that allows you to gain kind of an edge and understand where these folks are going, who they might be targeting, what kind of tools and tactics they're using, and this can allow you to be much more proactive about your cybersecurity and your anti-fraud capabilities and efforts. I'm launching a couple of things here as we speak. I want to go back to payment card fraud and end it with a couple of other interesting examples from the dark web. What we've seen is, again, a lowering of the threshold for folks to get into the business of cybercrime and fraud. Additional services and vendors are making it very, very easy for people to get into this business. So if you think back to the first example I shared with you, the JStash example, you had to go in, purchase the payment card data, and then if you're going to commit fraud, whether card present or card not present, you need to use that data. So if you're interested in committing card present fraud, you need to have the capability or a partner that has the capability to produce clone cards containing that card data. Well, this vendor here, the Clone Card Crew, they make it even easier. So you don't have to worry about producing clone cards. You just tell them what you want, what kind of card you're looking for. Perhaps you're looking for a specific bank or a specific region. They will produce a clone card for you and ship them to you using FedEx. So again, very limited effort and investment required on the part of the bad guy. You just need to know where to go, know exactly what you're looking for, and they can almost take care of everything A to Z. You get those clone cards. Hopefully, if they're good, you'll be able to go on a shopping spree and commit the fraud. The last example I want to share regarding payment card fraud is I want to go upstream a little bit and show you some of the tools and some of the technologies that are used to really begin these kinds of activities. This is a website. This is on Tor. So again, anonymous. This is a website run by a manufacturer, really a developer of ATM skimmers. These are the pieces of equipment that are used to skim payment card information from point-of-sale systems, gas pumps, etc. This developer has been in business for many, many years. They've got all sorts of products, different types of skimmers, different types of technologies that are used. And again, for those individuals or groups that are engaged in this kind of activity, if they're placing their own skimmers, all they need to do is know where to go, specifically this website, and then purchase the skimmers they're interested in. They're shipped using these, very legitimate shipping companies. Obviously, they're not aware of this type of activity, but then you receive this kind of information. The tools, the skimmers, and then you can get in the business of installing them and then siphoning the card data very, very quickly. So with this, I want to move away from payment card fraud and the payment card criminal ecosystem on the underground and cover a couple of other areas quickly. I want to begin by talking about malware. Obviously, many of you are very familiar with different types of malware families, whether it's Azeralt or Ursnif or Agent Tesla, which I'm displaying right now. What you've got today, again, keeping with the theme of an underground, community and a range of vendors and third-party services. Today, you've got a number of malware developers who are pretty well known in the underground community, and they sell their malware to different types of cyber criminals and hackers who then use them to go and infect individual users or business users or other entities with that kind of malware. So Agent Tesla is a pretty well-known malware family, pretty popular, developed initially in Eastern Europe, very popular around the world in places such as Latin America and Africa. The interesting thing about Agent Tesla is up until a while ago, it used to be hosted on agenttesla.com, so they were hiding in plain sight. They would position themselves not as a piece of malware, but as a kind of spyware tool that can be used to spy on your spouse or on perhaps your employees, if you will. And you can see that here. One of the telltale signs of criminal activity is poor grammar and spelling mistakes. Agent Tesla is definitely a malware family and has been used and is being used by cyber criminals around the world. But what's amazing is, again, this was hosted on a .com website, and what you could get when subscribing to Agent Tesla is not just an executable that's got the malware that's got the malware itself, but also services. As you can see here, you can get the hosting infrastructure and the panels around it. You can get support, customer support, if you will. You can get different types of packages. At one time, they had silver, bronze, silver, and gold and platinum packages. So depending on what you're paying and what tier you have, you get different, different types of services and customer support. And so, again, folks who are interested in running a malware campaign don't have to be technically savvy enough to produce a piece of malware. They just need to know how to use it. And so you go to one of these vendors, one of these groups out there that is selling this kind of stuff, and you can get in the business of executing malware campaigns very, very quickly. So let's talk about what happens when somebody is using a malware family like Agent Tesla. Well, one of the things that happens very often is they are infecting devices. Again, it could be personal devices or corporate devices, and then harvesting lots of data from those devices, anything from personal information to account credentials that can be used, bank accounts or other types of accounts. And what I've got here is a platform called BlackBet, which is a platform or a marketplace for compromised account credentials. So imagine this, you've got a criminal who is running a malware campaign, perhaps Agent Tesla. They've infected a machine, and once the malware is installed in the machine, it is collecting a huge amount of information, including account credentials for the person's online banking, e-commerce sites, etc. And what you see here is what some of these bad guys do with that data. So some of them might use it themselves, but others actually sell it or sell part of it to other criminals and fraudsters in the underground. And on this website, that's exactly what they do. So you see some of the announcements here. Folks are selling Postmates, Uber accounts. Again, these are compromised accounts that are typically stolen via malware. And then in this case, the bad guys themselves are not cashing out or exploiting those accounts, but they're selling it or trafficking it to other cyber criminals and fraudsters who are active in these communities. You can see your JetBlue accounts, Xfinity accounts. I might have some more examples here. No, it looks like they're the same. But again, anything from Grubhub, Xfinity. I'm not going to go on the bank accounts because that's obvious. What I wanted to show here is that there's really a very active marketplace for all types of accounts. And as you can see on the left, anything from bank accounts, which have an obvious purpose. If you've got somebody's credentials to a bank account, you can go in and try to commit fraud. You can try to attempt a wire transfer, other types of fraud. PayPal accounts, as you can see here, obviously those have value in them in that they're tied to payment methods. So if you've got access to a PayPal account, you can use it to commit fraud. But also all types of other accounts, as I'm showing you here, anything from Grubhub and JetBlue and and Xfinity and Uber. Those are accounts that have value in them, whether it's rewards, loyalty points, or the ability to commit some kind of fraud. On Uber, for example, they do ride fraud. So there's a way to leverage and exploit this kind of data. And really what I'm trying to share with all of you is the chain of the activity. So it begins with the malware infection, the collection of the compromised account credentials, and then ultimately the selling or the trafficking of that data on many of these underground communities and marketplaces. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about other services and tools that are easily available in the underground community. And I'll just give a couple of quick examples. When somebody is engaged in fraudulent activity or cybercrime, in many cases they're going to need scheme. You've got a lot of vendors in the underground community that traffic or provide that kind of data. So I'm showing you one here where you've got different, really it's a platform for different vendors to come in and offer various types of documents and identification documents that can be used by other criminals and fraudsters. If you look at this community, they've got about 6,400 members. They've got a few hundred vendors who offer different types of documents. And what's really interesting, and this is a screen that I have here, as you can see the reviews, what's interesting about this screen, and this is a theme that is very, very common when you go through different underground vendors and communities. There's a very active review and vendor feedback process. So imagine when you're purchasing something on Amazon or other legitimate e-commerce sites that you visit, you have the opportunity to review the seller, and you have the opportunity to see what other reviews have been posted about the seller, so you can make up your mind whether this is a vendor or a seller that you want to do business with. Well, the exact same concept is used in the underground very effectively and very, very commonly. And the idea is that bad vendors or unethical vendors, if you will, even in this underground marketplace, also need to abide by a set of rules. And if they are trying to rip people off, if they are not conducting business as they should, they will receive enough negative feedback and reviews, and they'll ultimately lose their standing in the underground community. So I won't go into the details of this one, but again, you can see vendors being scored on different types of attributes, allowing really the community to maintain, kind of a good set of vendors and weed out the ones who are unethical in their behavior, even in this underground community. In the interest of time, we're not going to go through so many examples, but I could even, if we had the time, I would even show you examples of forums where they have administrators who are actually tasked with this function, review feedback and complaints from different members of the community about other members, in some cases kind of arbitrate between them, and then when necessary, blacklist and even remove people from those communities and forums. So very, very effective mechanism that we see on a daily basis in our lives on the internet, and it's mirrored in the underground community as well. Another example of tools and services that I want to share with you, and this kind of goes back to Agent Tesla and malware campaigns. It's one thing if you've got a very successful piece of malware, which you can use for whatever type of cybercrime and fraud you want to execute. But it's another thing to actually infect, the target audience that you want to infect. Well, the good news is, again, there's a service for it. So on this website here, this is where a lot of cyber criminals and fraudsters come in to obtain email lists and mobile number lists of target victims. So I'll give you an example. If you're a cyber criminal and you want to conduct a malware campaign targeting individuals in New York City or New York State, and maybe the reason is you've got a very specific scheme and you're looking for New York-based victims, well, you would come here and you can quickly find a list of emails or mobile numbers for individuals in New York, and then you can target your phishing campaign, your malware campaign, or your mobile malware campaign against those individuals in a very targeted way. So again, using New York as an example here, for a small price of $40, I can buy 370,000 Hotmail emails allegedly belonging to individuals who reside in New York State. So again, very, very small price to pay. I get my kind of target list of victims, of potential victims, and then I can point my malware campaign, my phishing campaign against these individuals. So, if you kind of put all this in perspective, what these tools allow you to do is really draw on the best-in-class providers. So if you want to get the best malware, the most appropriate malware for what it is that you want to accomplish, if you want to get the best list of potential victims, you can kind of pick and choose between different vendors who are specializing in these kinds of activities, and then very quickly and very effectively build the operation that you need in order to carry out your scheme. Really all you need to do is be in the know where to go, know where to find these kinds of vendors, and with really just a few clicks, you can get into this business very, very easily. I have one final example that I want to share with you. I'm going to pull it up. I want to go back to my slides, and then I'll pull it up here. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the so what, the implications of everything that we're talking about, and of course I've mentioned this in the beginning of the discussion. It's very nice that all this information is out there. It's very nice that I can show you that you've got the ability to track and monitor a lot of this kind of activity. But so what? The important thing is to assume or to understand is that when done correctly, collecting this kind of information on a timely basis can yield very, very significant benefits by allowing you to get ahead of fraud and get ahead of cybercrime. The slide that I'm showing you right now is a real case study that we conducted with one of our clients. It's a large bank in the U.S. And the idea was to really quantify what we can do in a very, very short period of time. In this case, it was 1 month. And I'll pick on some of the highlights. So we were able to identify 400,000 compromised payment cards that they were not aware of. So these are cards that did not have any prior fraud attempts on them. By flagging those accounts and taking actions to either cancel and reissue or elevate risk monitoring of those payment cards, they were able to prevent $1.2 million in fraud losses. We were able to identify 7 new merchant breaches. So these are specific merchants that have been breached and were basically bleeding out payment card data on an hourly basis. And then I'm not going to get into a lot of the details on the right-hand side here, but we didn't cover some of these. We also helped this specific bank identify 498 records of their employees that have been compromised. So very detailed data on their employees, some of their account credentials, some of their personal details that were out there, and can be used by bad guys to target those employees in various social engineering and other types of attacks. Again, so not getting to each of these in a lot of detail, the point is, when done correctly, this information can be used as very effective, very actionable intelligence, getting ahead of some of these fraud attempts and cyber attacks that would be coming down the road. The other great thing is, and I'm not going to get into this in a lot of detail because I see we've got a bunch of questions and I want to leave time for that. The great thing about some of this intelligence is that you can put an ROI in it. You can really measure it. So if you think about compromised payment card data, if you think about account takeovers, if you think about some of the other things that I've been sharing with you, really you can quantify the results of getting ahead of that, right? People have, or a lot of our clients have, a very detailed history of fraud losses, of account takeover attacks, of different types of attacks. and they know what those yield in terms of losses, in terms of brand reputation. The good news is when you can get ahead of it and you can identify it up front, you can prevent it, and then you can really put an ROI, you can really put a number around it, so you can really quantify what it is that you're doing. So I want to leave you with that message. I think that's really the key takeaway from everything that we've been talking about today. And again, as I'm seeing a bunch of questions, let me pause here and open it up to some questions. Steve or Paul, I don't know how you want to do this, if you guys want to pick a few questions or you want me to just take a few of them, but I'll let you guys decide.
Great. Yeah, nicely done. Nicely done, Ellie. I'm happy to read some questions that you can answer, and great presentation, and certainly lots of questions to go through. Let's start with one. What actionable information can be gleaned from the underground without actually purchasing the data from the criminals?
A tremendous amount. Yeah, so a tremendous amount. The overwhelming majority of what we collect is immediately actionable, and we're not paying anybody for that kind of data. So everything that I shared with you earlier, compromised payment card data, account takeovers, employee credentials, other things that we didn't get into. A lot of that can be collected in a way that doesn't require any purchasing. Certainly nobody wants to enrich these guys or kind of perpetuate what they're doing. The examples that I shared with you, don't show how the collection is actually done on our end, but the systems and technologies that we've built go deeper than what the naked eye can see on many of these forums, many of these communities. So we're able to see a lot more data than what you saw here. So just assume that almost everything you saw here today, there's a very different way of collecting it through technology and other tools that we have that doesn't require any purchasing, and is very different than what the naked eye can see.
Yep, great. And this one I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but what happens if a novice tries to look around on these sites, or what would prevent me, Ellie, from just going in and getting the data myself?
So two things to keep in mind, and it's an excellent question. I'm glad you picked it. Number one, you need to assume that many of these sites are trying to infect the visitors and the users with malware or other types of tools that can allow them to figure out who it is, and in some cases try to gain information on them. So, if you're a legitimate individual or a corporation, you're trying to do this, you're probably going to get detected, which means they might target you in various ways. So you've got to think about operational security. You've got to have the right tools. You've got to have the know-how to navigate many of these communities and sources without taking a risk of being targeted. So that's number one, and really, really important to keep in mind. Number two is even finding this stuff. So some of this stuff is kind of out in the open. You can find it relatively easily. But a huge chunk of what we monitor are really exclusive underground communities, and so even if you've got the ability to monitor some of this kind of activity, you're not going to be able to monitor most of it. Really, the overwhelming majority. So trying to do this on your own, I think you got to on the one hand make sure that you know what you're doing, and you're not going to put yourself at risk. Number two, even if you're doing it, you've got to be pretty capable and pretty knowledgeable about how to find this information, how to extract it, and not waste a lot of time going after, just a few sources that are only a fraction of what's out there.
Yep, great response. And I think it is worth highlighting again. I know you showed a lot of live sites, but it isn't something that people should go home and say, hey, look, honey, look what I saw today. I'm going to pull this up on my home computer, right? Because the bad guys are trying to figure out who you are, and they could really do some damage. Can you just speak to that for a second, Ellie? I mean, these guys can really find anything out about you that they want, right? Once they discover who you are.
Well, look, they're pretty sophisticated, right? So they understand that there are going to be legitimate folks, whether it's companies or law enforcement agencies that are interested in monitoring this kind of activity. So you need to assume and expect that they have an effort in place to try to identify, who are the kind of the non-criminals who are trying to monitor what they're doing, and so they're taking pretty active measures to figure that out. And then, it could be as simple as just trying to kick you off and restrict access, which wouldn't be a bad thing. But then it could be more targeted, right? So, they can try to, go as far as trying to serve up malware or trying to target you with different tools. So, they've got a range of tools that they can deploy, and it varies on the site and varies who's running it. But the point is they're aware of folks like us and people that want to do this for the right reasons, and they're taking steps to try to mitigate that.
Yep. Another great question here. Is it safe to assume there are payment cards and account takeover information for pretty much every financial institution, large and small?
Yeah, I mean, we serve clients, from the largest FIs in the world down to small community banks and credit unions, and we collect intel for all of them on a regular basis. Obviously, the volumes will vary, but the account takeover at a local community bank. Yeah, it's all out there.
Yep. Another great question here. Do you intercept intelligence in real time, and do you pass that on to your customers?
Yes and yes. We see. Today was really a demo. We didn't get into a lot of the details of the kind of the core categories of intelligence that we focus on. But I think we absolutely collect in real time, and we will report things that are very, very timely. We've stopped cyber attacks. We've stopped large scale fraud campaigns in real time. So yeah, in our business, collecting and reporting information in a timely manner is critical. If you wait too long, it's not as valuable. Yeah, we've worked hard to develop a process that ensures that we can get it and report it very, very quickly.
Yep. Yep. What does Q6 provide that a mature intelligence program couldn't do themselves?
I guess it would depend on what the mature intelligence program is capable of doing. It's hard for me to answer that without a lot of context. I can tell you that a lot of the intelligence programs that are in place at some very large institutions that we work with. These are large, global banks or technology companies or social media companies. They're very, very good at what they do. However, their focus is more on analyzing and investigating events as they occur. They are less focused on kind of comprehensive collection of all this of everything that you saw in real time. That's not easy to do. That carries a lot of operational challenges and issues. So at a very high level, I'd say a lot of the very sophisticated, cutting edge organizations that we work with have very, very sophisticated intelligence programs, but they're not as much in the business of collection. They're more in the business of processing intelligence and acting on it. And where we really come in is in that collection side, where we can deliver huge amounts of actionable items every single day. So I hope that gives some idea, but it's kind of hard to answer that question without a lot more detail.
Yep. Well, and I actually have a bolt-on question to this, Ellie, that might, for example, from my perspective, I think a lot of large enterprises who have threat hunting and threat intelligence in place, they may have staff, or they may, buy or outsource threat intelligence feeds and those kind of things. But in general, my perspective is that information is kind of surface level, right? So they're screen scraping or accessing public websites and those kind of things versus getting in the weeds and actually getting, where the bad guys transact. Can you speak to that? I mean, is that a reasonable assumption, or can you speak to that level of differentiator, you think, from common threat feeds that enterprises are paying for, right? Subscription-based and internal threat hunting activities that typically you see at enterprises.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what I would add to that, the traditional intelligence feeds and the intelligence programs that were built around it are focused on indicators of compromise, IOCs, and those are IP addresses, file hashes, etc., that have been kind of flagged as potentially malicious by somebody else. In some cases, because they've seen it, as part of a malicious activity, or because they've got another reason to believe that it's associated with some malicious activity. So you've got these lists of IOCs, and an intelligence program is built around ingesting those IOCs, hunting for them or searching for them in your network environment, and then making sure that you've got the rules in place, and the ability to mitigate anything that might be associated with those IOCs. As you probably know, those types of lists are, in many cases, very stale. If somebody has seen that already, then it's kind of too late. The bad guys are not stupid. They cycle through infrastructure on a daily basis. For example, we track a lot of cyber criminals who create a new build of their malware every single day. So, if it's already been signatures by AV, well, tomorrow's going to be a brand new build that'll have a different signature. So it's useless. So, a lot of those lists, a lot of the traditional indicators are kind of stale by the time they get to you. Now, I'm not saying they're not useful. There's certainly some value to it, but a lot of the Intel programs really leverage those kinds of lists and IOCs. What we're talking about is, like you said, going a few levels deeper, to really track the activity itself. So where are the bad guys? What are they doing? What data have they already been able to compromise? And when you're at that level of detail, it's much more actionable, and it's much more impactful than some IOC that may have been detected by somebody and might have been related to malicious activity 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Another question: explain the difference between post-breach and pre-fraud.
Yeah. So when we talk about post-breach, pre-fraud, if you think back to the first example I shared, that marketplace for compromised payment card data, there it's post-breach in that the payment cards in that case have been compromised. Some bad guy was able to hack into a merchant, steal 2 million payment cards, and they have it. However, it's pre-fraud in that that data has yet to be used for fraud. And so the good news is, if you can quickly identify that post-breach data, but before the fraud occurs, you can eliminate the fraud. So you can prevent the fraud losses, you can prevent the disruption that your customer might experience. So, that's really the distinction. Something bad already happened in that, data or, access has been compromised. However, the actual, incident where you would see the impact, whether it's a fraud attempt or some sort of a cyber attack, has yet to occur, and you've got a window of time between those two events to hopefully do something about it.
Yep, excellent. And then I think we're winding down here on time, but I wanted to ask one other question, Ellie. If you could just reflect on, so how is it that you, I think we learned a lot today. I certainly did, and visualized a lot of things. But just to address so how do we go from what is there and how you capturing it to how you get it in the hands of a customer and how they utilize it? Do you have structured programs for that? And how are most customers really consuming the information that you're able to retrieve?
Yeah, so we've got different ways of delivering data or intelligence to our clients. We've got automated tools and processes that can make it very easy to integrate into existing systems that they have or processes that they might have. So we really offer a range of ways for our clients to receive the data. And as I mentioned before, we have a range of clients. So we've got some very, very sophisticated, Fortune 50 clients who, want data, they want machine to machine, data transfers, very kind of clean, API-like processes. And then you've got some smaller and mid-sized institutions that don't have those capabilities, and they need to, they need kind of more of a manual process in order to collect data or receive data from us and act on it. So we make it very easy. The good news for us is, we break our intelligence into, roughly 7 or 8 categories today, where they get finished intelligence in those areas. They're very well structured, very easy to use. So whether you're a top 10 bank that is using a certain type of system and you need data flowing in one way, or you're a small bank or a small e-commerce company and you need data moving in, coming in through SFTP, we can support that. Really the key is, I'm glad you asked this question. It's got to be easy for people to use. We understand people in information security or fraud departments have got a lot of data coming at them. So, we've made it very easy for people to receive data in multiple formats in multiple ways, so that really all they need to do is kind of turn us on. And once they turn us on, the data comes in very cleanly, very easily, and they can, either build automated processes to action the data, or if they want to take some manual processes, it's very easy for them. So, our onboarding time with a client, it's like a day. We turn on data, it starts coming in, they figure out very quickly what they need to do. It's a very simple and really, really short implementation timeline.
Yep, excellent. Well, thank you for all those great answers, and I think I got through all the questions, and I know we're out of time, so I'll wind it up here. And I just want to close on this segment by saying, wow, what great stuff you're doing. And some people might be wondering, like I wouldn't even know what to do with this data. And I can tell you that we can work with you on that. ASMGi and Q6 Cyber both, we would work with you on what the data means and how you would actually take action on it. But what excites me is that it is actionable and it is real time, right? It's for sale right now, and it's fraud hasn't happened, to your point, right? So there's still time to do something about it. Thank you very much. And certainly if you're interested in more information, follow up, and we'll be certain to get back with you and happy to set up one-on-one calls and those kind of things. So thank you again for attending. And the last thing before I close, this was the first presentation in ASMGi's cybersecurity webinar series, and next week we have another webinar about quantifying cyber risk, and I encourage all of you, if you're able, to attend that as well. But we'll be talking about just kind of the dire need for creating a holistic view of how cyber risk really impacts the business from an economic standpoint, right? The financial aspects of that, and being able to tie that to remediation efforts and various different things to help CISOs prioritize work and make sure you're working on, fundamentally the most sound things. And certainly being able to prevent fraud if a breach does occur has a lot of financial implications on organizations, so a huge tie into what we talked about today as well. But thank you all very much, and thank you, Ellie, for that wonderful presentation and great information. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thank you, Steve and Paul, for setting this up. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.